Good news, if you like that sort of thing. Personally, sometimes I believe it's a little overrated, but I got good news on the show tonight, and apparently, judging by certain people's takes earlier today, I'm just perennially bringing nothing but good news on the show. There's a lot of good news to be had, especially this year for a very special reason that I'm going to talk about. To lead the show off, it is Sunday night, May 19th, the year of our Lord 2024. We're jam-packed high atop a sun-drenched downtown Nashville, Tennessee. You realize that, of course, we're expanding the playoff. That's not the good news. In fact, some of us even think that's bad news. But since it's happening, that means a lot of you are going to get good news for the first time. I mean, mathematically, Stats and Info tells me it is a certainty. We've got to have new teams making the playoff. But whomst shall it be? We will discuss that tonight. Is Florida kind of sort of secretly figuring some things out? Are they getting hot? What's happening down there? One of you asked. Maybe even 5 of you asked. I will respond. Is college football playoff finally the ground where college football as a sport stands up to the NFL? There's something that's about to happen. It could have been inevitable, so I'm not going to go as far as to praise the leaders of our dear sport quite yet. But there's something happening. It's going to happen in December that is under the radar right now, but shouldn't be overlooked. Because there's been a precious lack of spine in this sport when it comes to standing up for certain things and to certain people. And, well, at least on one front this year, it's going to happen. All that, plus bold predictions. I've got the USC Mood Tracker on the show tonight. We got a lot to talk about. They're watching us in Abilene, Texas, Miami, Florida, Ruston, Louisiana, and Akron, Ohio. It's that time of year, friends. You can do this on any of the social accounts you want to. Follow me at Late Kick Josh. It is, it's mid-May, mid to late May. It's time to name the tour. I don't have it yet. I'm telling you, it's time for us together, collectively, as a university here at Pate State, to figure out what we're going to call this fall's tour. We had the Renaissance Tour, then we had the Every Given Saturday Tour, then we had the Once Upon a Saturday Tour, and this year, fill in the blank. It's for you to know and me to find out, because I like to outsource all the important ideas around here. In the meantime, let's dive into the show. So, college football playoff expands to 12 teams this year. Yes, yes, yes. Okay, we got that confirmed. That means, in all likelihood, we're going to have several first-time teams making the college football playoff. Now, I'm not even here to talk about whether it means the same as it used to. That's its own separate conversation. But making the playoff is going to be a lot more popular because we have more spots. How many teams are about to make this thing for the first time? I had some teams just boom, boom, boom. We were talking about this earlier today that popped in my head, like Utah. Utah's the favorite in the Big 12 right now. And the Big 12 is a conference that's interesting for a reason I'll talk about later, but their odds currently to make the playoff are plus 290 yes, minus 385 no. Now, what I'm talking about there, David at FanDuel, I hope you're listening. FanDuel's supposed to wait until later in the show, but I'm going to give you the odds at FanDuel for these teams to make or miss the playoff tonight. And it's fascinating because I have never paid much attention to this market until this year. But there are odds, any of these teams I'm about to mention, to make or miss the playoff. In the Big 12, Utah's got the best odds, and they're plus 290 to make it. If you think they're going to make it, those are your odds. Minus 385, no. You know what I think about? I think about this whole home playoff game thing, because the first round of the playoff games are going to be on home campuses, or campi, which is, as we know, the plural of campus. And what would it be like? Everyone's talking about these Big Ten schools, these SEC schools. Hey, someone could have to go into Salt Lake City for a first-round playoff game in December. You realize how relatively difficult that could be? You could have a random team like Georgia. Let's say Georgia didn't win the SEC. Therefore, they're not going to have the first-round home playoff game or the first-round bye. And Georgia just randomly ends up in Salt Lake City. Why? Because Utah won the conference. Therefore, they get one of the first-round byes. Is it the best system? I'm on record as saying no. Is it the system we have? I guess I'm on record as saying yes, because it is. Penn State's the same way. So Penn State right now, you realize that I guess you could call them favored to make the playoff. They are minus 142 odds at FanDuel to make the playoff. And I don't think anything needs to change. Some of these other programs, even considering the lowering of the bar because we've got more playoff spots, you could say like a Kansas State, I'm going to talk about them later, they still need to maybe elevate slightly as a program to just be in this thing every year. Penn State doesn't. Penn State's there. Penn State could not change a thing. They could just copy paste, as they have been, and they're good enough for a 12-team playoff. And I think the same thing about them as I think about Utah. But a lot of people are talking about this scenario of Penn State. Let's say they lose to Ohio State, and let's say they finish a 10-win team. They don't play in Indianapolis, but they're a nice solid 9 seed or something like that, or a 7 seed, or whatever the case may be. Maybe they get a first-round home playoff game. Now, that's the one. That's the whole spectacle aspect. And here's a question that I would encourage you guys up in Harrisburg and York and places surrounding the greater State College area to think about. Is every playoff game a whiteout? I don't know. There are no rules here. We're making the rules as we go. How about Ole Miss? Ole Miss is on everyone's radar. Ole Miss has minus odds to make the playoff right now, too. Currently, minus 122 odds over at FanDuel to make the playoff. So there's the golf clap. Now what? Because with great expectations come questions like these. Is it enough to just make the playoff? Now, this is an absurd question in the old school. In the old 4-team era, Ole Miss making the playoff would be insane. It would be like the win of all wins. But think about this with me here. I'm asking Ole Miss folks, like you can tell me if you disagree with this, but I'm thinking about how thoroughly all the chips have been pushed into the middle of the table for this year. I'm thinking about Jackson Dart coming back. I'm thinking about everything seemingly having built to 2024, how aggressive they were in the transfer portal, the fact that 12 teams are going to make this thing now. So my question is, if I could tell you right now, you'll make the playoff, lose in the first round, and you're out. Is that good enough for you? Very curious, genuinely curious about this. Georgia folks would say no. Ohio State folks would say no to that. This is Ole Miss. Ole Miss, rarefied air we're talking about. Lane Kiffin's never taken his team to the playoff. They've never had at least an odds market that looks this favorable. 4-team, 12-team, whatever. Would you be happy making the playoff? I sort of think the answer is no. I sort of think their expectation level is higher than that. Now, you can go on this whole alternate diatribe and you can say, well, that's unrealistic or that's unreasonable. That's fine. Okay, you may even be right. I'm not asking what's reasonable. That's not fun. Man, this is college football. This is the SEC. This is the transfer portal era. This is the NIL era, man. We're talking about high expectations at Ole Miss, so I want to know how high the expectations are. That's all. And as for expectations, and as for having lower expectations than the market, let me take you to Miami, because Miami could make the playoff for the first time this year. Now, I know my audience. I know my audience very well. There is very few, if any, teams that are more polarizing when we mention them on the show than Miami, which is absolutely fine with me for obvious reasons. But with Miami, I have noticed that there's a large contingent of you guys that think it's insane to be talking about them in relation to the playoff, but it's not. They're plus 198 odds to make the playoff, guys. That means if you bet them to make the playoff, you're not getting a whole lot of added return aside from a 1-to-1 return, because the odds makers don't think it's that wild that Miami makes the playoff. They've got their over-under win total at 9.5. Do you understand? I think you do, because you understand math. They got to win double-digit games just for the over to hit. That's where they've set the odds market for Miami. And by the way, they open at Florida. So it's not like they have 4 cream puffs out of conference. And save it with your Florida cream puff jokes. I don't want to hear that. It's a tough place to go week 1. So with Miami, here's my question. It's kind of like Ole Miss. I have a question on if they make it. If Miami makes it, forget about what they do in the playoff. I'm just asking you because I want to get all this on the record and out in the open in May when everyone's thinking clearly. If Miami makes the playoff this year, does that validate the coaching staff? And does it invalidate a lot of the doubts people had? Or if they make it, do people just say, well, yeah, they went and got Cam Ward. Anyone would have made the playoff with Cam Ward. You can have your opinion. Whether I disagree or agree with it, that's another show. I'm just trying to get all this on the record. If Miami makes the playoff for the first time in that staff's tenure, what do we think? Do we think that that alone validates? Or is the same level of doubt and the same level of detraction that currently exists out in the marketplace still there if they don't make the playoff and win games in the playoff? Kansas State. And I'm going to go back to this, and boy, oh boy, do I have a story for you in just a second. some people on the staff know where I'm about to go with this, because it was always going to be an audible during the show whether I was going to tell this story or not. But yeah, I'm going to tell it. So first off, let's talk about the playoff. Kansas State plus 290 to make it, minus 385 to miss it. So going back to the Big 12 for a second, there's no team in the Big 12 that has minus odds to make the playoff, which may seem weird to you because you know it's a certainty that one of them's going to make it, right? The conference champ's going to make it. There's no way they're not. And they could have more than one team, but at least one team will make it. So how is no one favored? Well, it's just because competitively the conference is that balanced. There are like 9 or 10 teams that are in this top pack in the odds market, and there's really not one that separated itself. Kansas State and Utah pretty much have very similar odds. In fact, they have identical odds at FanDuel right now to make versus miss the playoff. If Kansas State were to make it, here's my question for Kansas State folks. Bill Snyder is an institution in college football, but especially in Manhattan. And I'm certainly not suggesting that anyone overtakes Bill Snyder because it's an apples to bowling balls comparison. But if Chris Kleiman, who's already made a name for himself, if he were to take them to the playoff, how much does that elevate his name? How much more highly is he thought of? I think he's already thought of very highly. I think there is a very, very reasonable argument to be made that he's a top 5 head coach in college football. Not resume-wise, not trophy case-wise. I'm talking about when resource is accounted for relative to his accomplishments. There are very few head coaches doing it at a higher level than Chris Kleiman. If they make the playoff, if they start adding playoff hardware in their trophy case, how much more highly is he thought of? I think it'd be significant. It'd be the same coach, but I think it'd be significant. And the last one that has to be at least inserted into this conversation is USC. Now, we're going to talk about USC at the end of the show tonight, and I'll give you my story in a second. USC's minus 590 to miss the playoff. That just means if you doubt USC, you got to bet a whole lot of money in order to make any money off of your doubt. They're plus 410 to make it, though. So how much do you believe? Because I know, again, when we talk about Southern Cal later tonight on the show, there will be people who, no matter what, I don't even know what I'm going to say yet, but no matter what I say, there will be people who claim I'm hating on USC, which I'm not. But there are some harsh realities that I think have to be faced there. The odds market agrees, and I don't think there's anti-Southern Cal bias at FanDuel last time I checked. They literally have to be right or have to put a fair number out there. But if they're wrong, I'm asking you guys, you betting this? You getting action at plus 410 for USC to make the playoff? Because if everyone else out there is wrong in their doubt that maybe they're still thin on the line of scrimmage and it takes more than 1 year to overhaul a defensive DNA strand, then bet it. Bet it. But I will say this. Out of all the big games in week 1 this year, that LSU game's the most unpredictable. The least amount of feel I have for anything right now is how USC versus LSU will look. But if they were to go through all that and they make the playoff, and Lincoln Riley, a year after claiming he needs to overhaul his defensive philosophy, has done it enough to where they make the playoff, that's a really, really big deal. They probably, I don't know what would be the situation at that point. They probably wouldn't be in a position this year, even if they maximize this team's potential, to go challenge for a national championship. But I still think it'd be one of his best accomplishments. I'll talk about Riley a little bit later. Okay, so listen to this. All right, with the Kansas State thing, I have a story that I meant to tell you guys months ago, and I forgot about it, but I was reminded of it today. So Kansas State goes and wins the Pop-Tart Bowl, first ever Pop-Tart Bowl, right? And the whole thing was the mascot sacrificed himself into a toaster, and then out of the toaster popped a full edible Pop-Tart that the winning team got to eat. That was the trophy for the Pop-Tart Bowl. Greatest thing I've ever seen in the modern era, perhaps any era. So Kansas State flies back home with frosting on their faces, and they wanted to honor the team. See, you know all that part. Here's the part you don't know. Kansas State, I have it on good authority, wanted to honor the Pop-Tart Bowl team. And they hit up the folks at the Pop-Tart Bowl, and they say, can we get the mascot to come appear with the team? This thing's been really fun. Everyone's enjoyed it. And Pop-Tart hits him back and says, well, no, he's dead. You ate him. He's not with us any longer. Silence. There's no LOLJK. There's no laughter. There's nothing. They just said, you can't have the mascot appear with your team because you ate him. So then Kansas State's like, but aren't there 2 Pop-Tarts to a pack? And they say, yeah, that's how we'll have one for next year. And then Kansas State still looking over both shoulders thinking we're getting punked here. And then the follow-up question, which is the only logical way to go, is, okay, but what about the year after that? And Pop-Tart's just going to change flavors. At that point, we'll just change flavors. Dead serious. They wouldn't send the mascot because they said a mascot that's been eaten and dead cannot logically appear at your team celebration. I was unfamiliar with Pop-Tart's game, but now that I understand how dedicated they are to this, I will sign any piece of paper. The Pop-Tart Bowl should probably be in the playoff at this point. The Pop-Tart Bowl is riding harder for college football than most people in leadership positions in college football. If we're just calling it for real, that's what's happening right now. Unbelievable adherence to the game at Pop-Tart. And frankly, I hope some of you are watching and paying attention. Next up, we had a question, and I would like to welcome you all who just joined late into tonight's show. I know someone probably just walked in the door, like in the middle of that story, and you thought I was just presenting fan fiction. That's not fan fiction. It's the real thing. Pop-Tart is, they are committed to the cause. So whoever wins that thing next year, I'm pretty sure you're getting blueberry. But the year after that, we got a flavor change coming. Anything could happen. Whomst amongst us knows. So we had a question from Stan. Okay, Stan Kirby. I get what he did with this. Stan up in Little Rock said, hey, with Nick Saban retired, will Alabama versus Georgia still be the biggest matchup in the SEC? Yeah, I think for the time being it is. However, there's no way it's the same. I mean, I think I'm right about that. There's no way it feels the same. You can't possibly get that Saban-Kirby thing without Nick Saban. Now, Alabama could still be really good. Georgia could still be good. Maybe they're the best program in the conference. But to me, what made Bama, Georgia great and like really, really thick with hostility was the Saban-Kirby dynamic. And I grew up right on the Chattahoochee River. I grew up on the border of these two. And I was down there when Saban got hired. And of course, like everyone else, watched Alabama with Kirby Smart as the defensive coordinator. And then about the time Kirby goes to Georgia, I'm coming up in like local radio and local TV down in Columbus, and it was awesome. It was awesome, but I was on the front lines of seeing both fan bases and how they interpreted, their respective roles, but also like I was watching this evolution in the way they viewed each other. Georgia, Alabama was always kind of a Cold War down there. They're not traditional rivals. They barely ever played, but yet the hostility, because they share a border with each other, was really thick. And there was always this feeling amongst Georgia folks before Saban came to Alabama that your yesterday's news, like, yeah, your trophy case looked impressive, but in the here and now and moving forward, we got Mark Richt and we're better than you. But then Nick Saban comes along, and then Alabama kind of reestablishes itself as the dominant program once they take down Florida. And then Georgia folks always felt to themselves that they were capable of matching what Bama did. They just needed their version of Nick Saban. But then everyone understood there is no other Nick Saban. Or is there? Because there's this dude over there named Kirby Smart who was one of ours. We just need to bring him home. And then he comes home. Kirby wasn't some Akron or Kent State or Eastern Michigan grad, all due respect to the MAC. He was a Georgia guy. And when he comes home, it's Georgia with one of their guys that came from the dark side that's going to help us establish ourselves as the top program in America. So, it's so thick with hostility. The staffs hated each other. The recruiting staffs hated each other. Half of them worked for one and then went to work for the other and vice versa. So they recruited against each other. And what happened was really funny because nationally, you would look and you would think, oh, Alabama's chief rival is Auburn. Bama was never recruiting against Auburn. It was Georgia, Bama, Georgia. Like those were the two that were competing for the best recruits in the country and in the South. So I think there's a lot to be said for the competitive nature. They were two of the best rosters in America. They were two of the best teams, two of the best coaching staffs in America. But the hostility, like how personal it was, you could have cut it with one of those butter knives from McDonald's, the plastic version. That's where the intensity came from. And here's the other thing that happened. When Kirby came to Georgia, he told them everything that they didn't want to admit before that. Georgia folks, some of them, I'm not going to paint with a broad brush, but like Georgia folks and people at Georgia thought they were doing things at the highest level possible, but they weren't. Kirby was at a place where they were doing it at the highest level possible. And when Kirby came to Georgia, he let them know, I can give you those results, but I can't give it to you unless you do things at the highest level possible. Don't worry, I know how to do it, but you just got to let go and let me handle it. And they did. First time Georgia's ever done that as a program. It didn't happen overnight, but slowly but fairly surely, they relinquished this adherence to, you know, the more sweater vest mentality, and they went full polo mentality. And I don't mean the sport, I mean just a different way of doing things. And now it's yielded results, but it was an amazing time. Saban versus Kirby kind of had the longevity that people thought Saban versus Urban Meyer was going to. And Urban Meyer was out of the conference a couple of years after Nick Saban came in. So then you beg the question, okay, well, with Saban gone, what does Kalen DeBoer's Alabama look like? Well, I don't think they're going to take a back seat to anyone. I don't think Alabama's going anywhere. They'll still be really good. In fact, you could find that they squeeze a little bit more game to game, roster to roster, recruiting class to recruiting class from an evaluation and development standpoint than even you expected them to. Because that's what he's always done. It's what DeBoer's teams have always done. Bama's not going anywhere. I just think there's not a natural tie, obviously. I don't know that have Kirby and Kalen DeBoer really crossed paths? I don't think they have. I could be wrong on that. So it's just going to be those logos. It's going to be those brands. They'll always matter. I think they play this year. They play in week 4, and Georgia's about a 3.5 point favorite in that game in Tuscaloosa right now. Now, if you want it to very quickly take on a personal feel, have Georgia go there and lose as a favorite with Carson Beck returning and with Alabama, you know, seemingly hitting the reset button. That's not really what's happening at all. They got a lot of really good players over there still. But this will be the first time in a very long time that a team will be sort of low-key expected to go to Alabama and win. Texas went there. They weren't expected to win. LSU in 2019, they weren't expected to win. Folks thought they had a good shot. This Georgia team will be expected to go to Alabama and win. Well, if they don't, and they got their returning quarterback coming in, Carson Beck, and they go over there and they drop a game, they're not out of it because you got to lose like 3 games, 4 games to be out of the playoff now. But if all of a sudden Kirby goes 1-4 versus Saban and then gets started 0-1 versus Kalen DeBoer, you won't have to worry about anything else. He'll hear it from his own folks because they've set an insanely high standard there. He set an insanely high standard there. So that's the way I think very quickly it would maintain its status as one of the premier rivalries in the sport. Other than that, I don't really know that you can maintain that, man. That's why they're so special, because what it takes for a rivalry to be that intense is pretty fleeting. It's no different than a storm maintaining maximum strength. Those ingredients have to come together perfectly. I'm just glad we got to see it as long as we did. I'm not writing the eulogy or anything like that. I'm just saying the matchup takes on a little different form now. Academy.com. Why did I say .com? Academy's not a website company, are they? Well, they are a company with a website. And as we sit here right now, we've been doing a little experiment this summer, and we'll continue. I would love for you to patronize our partner, which just is a fancy way of saying shop at Academy. And a lot of you go to their stores every day, and I'm all for it. However, there is a special incentivization right now for our viewers and listeners to either do one of 2 things. Either use this QR code on the screen right now, if you're listening on YouTube or watching on YouTube, or go to the show description, and there's a link there if you want to click on that. If you're listening on podcast, do the same thing. Pull up the YouTube link, go to the show description, click on the link. Do whatever you were going to do. Buy whatever you were going to buy. Buy your fold-out chairs. Buy your coolers. Buy your canopies. Buy your big league chew. Buy whatever you want to. Just do it through those portals. Because, well, frankly, it helps us just a little bit more at the moment because of our little summer experiment than the other means. Not to say I'm going to get mad if I see you in the aisles of Academy tomorrow, because I'll probably be there at some point this week, because I have a few purchases of my own. Which begs the question, Colin, Should I myself click on the link, I think I will. So never mind. You're probably not going to see me in the store this week. You probably will have to wait a few weeks to see me in the store again. But maybe we'll bump into each other in the e-aisles of academy.com. Thank you guys so much. We always appreciate them. They've been one of our day one sponsors. They have been our day one sponsor. It's not like we have 15 of them. All right, I've got some excitement about myself right now, and yet I didn't even bring my water jug in here, so I'll have to pretend to be hydrated. But let's pause amongst ourselves for a second, and let's appreciate something that could be happening. 3-second moment of silence. Hand over the heart. All right, now, what are we memorializing? Well, as you know, everyone's terrified of the NFL. And the only thing worse to me than college football trying to turn into the NFL is everyone in college football tiptoeing around the NFL, being terrified of them. I've always been of the opinion that college football should operate and run its race. And if you aggravate the NFL every now and then, oh well. Let me explain something. Okay, if the alien that we consult with every now and then arrives here on Earth and checks in with us like how's it going? I explain to the alien, let me explain to you, alien. We got the NFL over here. It's a mega power. No form of entertainment has ever risen to the collective heights that the NFL is right now in the history of this world. I don't know about the other planets. You'd know better than I do on that front. Ha ha ha, he laughed. And so I continue and I say, now imagine a world where you get to exist and everyone bends the knee to you and your workforce is already well known because there's this thing called college football that develops them for you. And they basically serve as a giant marketing mechanism where before the players ever arrive in your draft, they play in front of 80 or 90,000 people on Saturdays. They play on national television. You don't have to pay a dime for it, actually. And so all of your marketing and development is done prior to the players coming to you, and that you just get to reap all the benefits. And you don't even have to do anything. You don't have to subsidize it. You don't have to support it. In fact, you can act like total jerks and act like it doesn't even exist and act like college football should thank the Lord every night. They just get to breathe the same air as you. What would you think about that, alien? The alien would probably say that's pretty messed up. That would never fly on Jupiter or Mars or Venus, but somehow, some way, it still flies on Earth. Saturday, December 21st. Some of that may be about to change. So I know you haven't looked that far ahead in your schedule, but don't worry, I have. And it just so happens that we'll have college football playoff games that day, 3 of them actually, on the same day that the NFL has Texans at Chiefs at 1 o'clock Eastern Time and Steelers at Ravens at 4:30. And why is this such a big deal? Well, it's because college football has bent over backwards to avoid going head-to-head with NFL games. Because God forbid we ever watch Ole Miss play Arizona State at the same time Ravens and Steelers are playing. What could happen? The world would end, right? What would happen? Well, we'd all just melt down and everything would be thrown into oblivion. Actually, what would happen is exactly what will happen December 21st. Some people are going to watch the NFL. Some people are going to watch a college football playoff game. I know which one I'm watching. I think if you're watching me right now, you probably fall in the same camp as me. But if you don't, that's fine. The point is, if it doesn't impact your wallet, why would it impact your mood? Great Meemaw quote there. There's this cabal, it's the only word I can use. There's this cabal of executive, there's the three Pete's, there's a group of people who run college football. I don't want to use the wardrobe metaphors too much tonight. I already used them once. There's a group of suits, high-level mustache types that run college football, and they've been terrified of running directly opposed to the NFL because they're worried that the ratings that they, get for those games in the playoff, they won't be big enough and it'll look bad, and they don't want to make the NFL mad for whatever reason. And therefore, they've structured the entire college football postseason to work around the NFL. The NBA tried this. And then the NFL said, hey, you know what we're going to do? Although we get our way on everything, we're going to have NFL games on Christmas. Bye. And the NBA looked and said, oh, but I thought if we worked to your appeasement that you would favor us in the end. Nope, don't care about you. Actually, we never even knew you existed. And the NFL treats college football the same way. So finally, whether it was for lack of option or because someone somewhere found a set in the room, college football finally said, you know what, we're actually going to look at the NFL schedule, we're going to see that there are games that day, and we're going to play our playoff games anyway. I have a wild theory on this, and the wild theory is the ratings for those first two games, those first two college football playoff games, those days won't break any records. But I'll tell you what they will do. They'll take a bite out of those two NFL games. Those two NFL games will do big numbers. They will be by 10 miles, the most watched broadcasts those days. But here's the thing that happens in the ad sales world. You don't go to Toyota. You don't go to Academy. You don't go to FanDuel. You don't go to these companies and say, hey, a lot of folks will watch our show. They want to know more than that. They want to know about what they can expect. And they want to sell against a certain number. And so if you go to them and say 20 million people or thereabouts are going to watch this game, they say, that's great. Here's how much money we'll give you. But then when you come back and you only had 15.9 or 16.6 Academy or FanDuel or maybe even a random gas station company out there says, where was the rest of the audience? Well, they were actually over watching Penn State, Virginia Tech, sir. I'm sorry. It won't ever happen again. Well, yeah, it will. Because what actually happens with the NFL is it's everyone's backup option. The NFL is what it is because it's an insanely entertaining product. And the games matter a whole lot. And the brands are world known. And you know, a lot of people who are going to watch Chiefs Texans because it's their priority A. But there is this huge collection of people who would also watch Chiefs Texans because nothing else that's good enough is on. And so there is no backup option. But that group, there's a lot of them in that group who, if you put a college football playoff game on, would say, oh, I'd much rather watch a college football playoff game than this. Not the folks who were always going to watch Chiefs Texans. I'm talking about the group out there that makes the NFL numbers what they are every week, that just don't have any other option because every other thing on TV pretty much sucks right now. And so they go and they're watching it just to watch it. The watch it just to watch it crowd has a large portion that'll end up on the college football game, enough to where you won't outdraw the NFL. No one here is ever suggesting that. But I know this world. I know the world I live in. It's not whether someone outdrew you. It's what did you deliver to your partners relative to what you told them you would deliver. And if you don't deliver, if you're just delivering 70 or 80% of what they were promised, they don't like that. And I have a theory that if college football does oppose the NFL for a couple of cycles here in the playoffs, it may be the NFL that wants to work around that. It may be the NFL that says, you know what, we don't like this so much. Hello, college football. It's nice to meet you. Have you been here the whole time? It's nice to meet you. Let's negotiate. I had Klatt on the show a few months ago, and he said what I think is probably the best approach, and that is for NFL and college football to work together and have your afternoon games that then lead into college football playoff primetime games. In a normal world, that's how it should work. The NFL should appreciate college football for what they provide the NFL on a multitude of fronts. They don't, but they should. I'm just asking you guys, and most of you don't, but I'm asking those of you who are prone to this, please don't fall into the casual trap of starting to talk about TV ratings. It doesn't affect you. It does not matter. It does not impact your wallet one bit. 50 million people could watch the college football playoff first-round games, and it wouldn't matter to you. A lot of people would get rich off of it. You are not one of those people. So I guess we could figure out a way for us to become. Even then, I still don't care about it. So if I don't care about it, you really shouldn't care about it. The point is, college football will just stand its ground for once in its life. You might find out that you didn't have as much to be scared of as you thought you had to be scared of. That's all I'm saying. Good for whoever in the room made this call, by the way. Wichita, Kansas, they're tuned in there. Ideal, Georgia, which is on the CSX Fitzgerald subdivision in Ideal, Georgia. They're watching. And Meridian, Mississippi, they're watching as well. How would I know that? Who knows? Yeah, let's talk about football. Hey, why not? Let's go ahead and talk about them. I had a question. Well, I didn't. Cliff did. Cliff had a question from Tampa Bay, Florida. He said, are you finally buying Billy Napier stock after seeing what the Gators just pulled off in the transfer portal? Well, I never sold my Billy Napier stock. I'm not like some of these folks. I have been listening. Everybody has sold Billy Napier in Florida down the river. I haven't. I bought stock in him when he was hired, and then they've been bad the first 2 years. I didn't sell my stock. I have looked. First off, that piece of B-roll we run with Napier always makes it look like he's peeing over in the corner. But I'm asking Colin to keep it in the show because it's like tradition at this point. If you're listening on a podcast, I don't know what to tell you. But I never sold my Napier stock. However, I have noticed what they've been doing in the portal. So they just took 15 overall kids in the portal, and it's got a lot of people excited. They locked down the number 5 overall portal class. It's Ole Miss, Oregon, Bama, A&M, Florida, Texas, Florida State. So it's a bunch of teams basically that you expect to compete for the playoffs, and then Florida's just mixed in, and A&M's in there as well. So they had the number 13 recruiting class this past cycle. They just landed the number 5 portal class. Elijah Badger was a critical addition. They just got him as a wide receiver from Arizona State. They had Pearsall come from there a couple of cycles ago and ends up being a first-round draft pick. I don't doubt the developmental piece at Florida. I certainly don't doubt the evaluation piece. They're doing those things very well. It's just they need time. They always have needed time. The inside offensive lineman, they got him from USC. They got Cormani McLean, really interested to see how he pans out. The former top-rated DB in the country from like last recruiting cycle. He's there now. So there are no guarantees here. I'm always very careful when I talk about Florida. But after the trip we took down there a couple of weeks ago, it's like 3 or 4 weeks ago now, we got a really, really good look. I get a good look at a lot of these programs when I go. And the reason I mention that is because comparatively, it gives you a really good idea of some programs out there that think they're doing it at a high level, but they don't get that they're still falling short. There are programs like that. Like when I'm at Georgia, there's no doubt. When I'm at Ohio State, Bama, like there's no doubt those places are just machines and everything's moving the same direction. And it's like if you get in the way, you'll just get crushed. And then there's some other places that are versions of that, and they think they've got the volume knob turned up to 10, but it's really like a 7.5 or an 8, but they don't know because they're totally insulated in their world. I'm telling you this because, as I've said before, and I'll say again, when we were around Florida, Florida feels like one of the big boy programs. It's just the results aren't there yet. Now, I'm a believer that results are always downstream of process and downstream of program. So what that means is you could be doing it right and have terrible results for a little while, because no two situations are the same. So if you inherit a gold mine, you could win immediately. If you inherit a dumpster fire, it could take 3 or 4 years. So first off, what do you think Billy Napier inherited? And then secondly, let's say he inherited very much a work in progress. Well, how long does it take to fix that? How long is it before it's fair to just straight up judge on wins and losses? I think you'll see improvement this year. I have very little doubt you'll see improvement this year. What I wonder is, how do we define improvement? Because for a lot of people, it's just, did you win more games this year than you did last year? Well, that's understandable. Like in the NFL especially, that logic is understandable. When you play the schedule they're about to play, you can call it excuse making all you want to. There is a world where they are very much improved this year and struggle to win 7 games. Now, they could win 9 games for all I know. But I'm interested in just watching them. If they win 7, if they win 6, if they win 9, do I watch them and say, you know, they're playing better. Like, they look better. Across the board, they look better. It may not be reflected in the win-loss column. I wonder how the country will judge them. There is a sizable portion who believes, no matter how much we preach against it on this show, they believe that you are what your record says you are, and that's all that ever matters. And I don't agree with that all the time. Sometimes you are what your record says you are. Sometimes you're worse than what your record says you are. Sometimes you're better than what your record says you are, because not every 9-3 is equal in college football. It really isn't even in the NFL. No one goes 9-3 in the NFL, but it really isn't even equal there. But it's much more calibrated at the pro sports level than it is at the college level. So to answer the question, I've still got all my Billy Napier stock. A lot of you have sold on it. A lot of you call me foolish for still buying into it. Well, okay. There's no guarantee it's going to work out. I'm just telling you, I've been around a few of them, and I tend to trust my instinct on knowing who has it and who doesn't. But I've been wrong before. So, you know, it's not like I'm claiming I'm batting 1,000 here. I trust that they're doing it the right way there. So I think they'll be improved this year. I think this portal class, especially at the wide receiver position, they needed that last edition pretty badly. I think that'll go a long way in deciding, along with now like offensive line. Still questions there for me, but edge rusher as well. We'll see. Very interesting team to watch. Big week 1 game against Miami. Very big. They don't ease into it down there. Let's go bold predictions. Why not? Also, during that segment, I got to be really careful here. Oh, okay. I thought I was going to have a bad leg cramp. This chair like cuts off circulation. It's tough. Any of you who know my story, this is not really part of my story. It's just a thing about me. Know that I get like devastating leg cramps, like the worst cramp you've ever gotten, times it by 5, and that's what I get. I get the migraine of leg cramps, and it hasn't ever happened on the show. But when it does, Colin will just have to throw a slate up because it will be worse than like if I lose my voice on air. I will be inconsolable on the ground for 5 minutes minimum. When we were at the Pac-12 championship game, I took a red-eye flight to Atlanta for the SEC championship game, and in the middle of the night, I thought I was going to get sleep on the plane. Middle of the night, I kid you not, I just moved slightly. It's like there was gridlock in my, I think it was my left hamstring, and I was done. I had to jump up and just stand straight up on the plane. And it looked like I was about to like charge the cockpit. I'm surprised I didn't get tackled. I just had to stand there. It's the middle. It's like 3 a.m. We're over Kansas or something, and I just jumped up out of nowhere. Fortunately, most people were asleep and didn't see it, but that was a tough flight for me. And then it happened again. I'm sitting with Emily Proud and Dennis Dodd. We're on set in Atlanta. Brian McFadden was sitting next to me as well. They're counting us down. We got 30 seconds until we go live. It happened again. There's a picture of me somewhere having to straighten my leg out, and 30, 25, 20, 15. Am I a hero for making it through that day? I can't say for sure, but yeah, I kind of am. All right, let's go bold predictions. These are your predictions. And Colin, since we're going to cut this a little differently tonight, let me give you more of a classical intro here. I wanted your boldest predictions for the 2024 college football season. I want the stuff you believe in enough where you'd bet your own money on it. Like, here's what it looks like. First prediction tonight, and this would raise a lot of eyebrows in the South, particularly Lee County, Alabama. Jacob from Indianapolis says Auburn wins 9 games. He even says they knock on the door of the playoff. I'll just stop at Auburn wins 9 games. This is an 8.5 on the boldness scale for me. Their over-under win total at FanDuel 7.5. So this isn't just crazy, like out of the realm of possibility stuff. It's very simple what would have to happen here. Number one, Peyton Thorne would have to be the 2021 version of himself at quarterback. You would have to have that true freshman class erupt. They'd have to go off. The schedule that they play, I think, would have to have either a lot of one-possession games go their way, or there may need to be a team or two there that we expect a lot from that just ends up not being good. So Oklahoma comes in there week 5. They go back-to-back at Missouri, at Kentucky. Like, let's say Oklahoma ends up being a bad team, or Kentucky is bad, or A&M Bama back-to-back at the end of the year. Let's say one or both of those underachieve. Well, all of a sudden the schedule's more workable. Those are ways that you could win 9 games. They should start 4-0. Alabama, A&M, Cal, New Mexico, Arkansas. Notice, by the way, they don't leave home in September. October 5th is their first road game. So if you're a young team, a team that's going to lean on a lot of young players, and you're trying to get your legs under you, you could have no better start than that. But then you get out the gate, and then you get in the SEC play, and it gets real. I think that's an 8.5. Winning 9 games in a year where you got to lean on so many young guys. By Hugh Freeze's own admission on this show last month, they got to do that. I'm going to make that an 8.5. This next one is our first 10 of the entire cycle. We've been doing bold predictions, I think, 5 weeks in a row now. Jake said Deion Sanders takes another job before the end of the season. If there's one thing Deion is good at, it's knowing when the ship is sinking and getting off quickly. This is a 10. How does this happen? In what world does this happen? Now, if you would have said Deion leaves Colorado somehow after the season, well, okay, that's not even that bold. But you're saying during the season. Okay, so one of two things could happen here, outside of some scandal. One of two things could happen here. Either they're so good that he gets hired by another school, which is tough to see, but maybe. Or the other would be he's so bad they decide to fire him, but they're not going to do that. And in either of those scenarios, his son's literally the quarterback on the team. So what's he doing? Either voluntarily leaving him behind or being forced to involuntarily leave him behind? I don't think either of those things is happening. So I'm going to make that a 10. Is it a mutual parting of ways? Like, does he go become the president of Aflac? Are you suggesting he takes another coaching job? Does he go into TV? And if he does any of those things, why is he leaving during the season, Jake? What do you know that I don't know? So until further notice, that's a 10 on the boldness scale. This one's also nearly a 10, but at least, well, let me read it to you and then you'll tell me what you think about it. Because I would actually like to see the next one happen. So Douglas in New Hartford, New York says Nebraska goes 11-1 and makes the college football playoff. That's a 9.75, but it's not a 10. 9.75. So they're over under 7.5. As you know, it's been a little while since Nebraska basically breathed the air of national relevance, period. And by national relevance, I mean being in the playoff hunt, to be clear. But Husker magic is a real thing. I do believe in Husker magic. You may have to dust it off, go up in the attic and open a couple old cardboard boxes and try to find it. But Husker magic could strike. Now, to me, winning 9 games would be magical. You're telling me they're going to win 11 and they're going to the playoff. Well, that's a 9.75 on the boldness scale, but I do get what you see. Colin, keep this schedule up here for a second. If I just read it off, if I'm a Nebraska fan, so let's say I'm in North Platte, Nebraska tonight, and therefore I'm an eternal optimist. I believe Dylan Raiola is just going to be a true freshman, All-American star quarterback, and I believe that our defense is, at least the staff is one of the best in the country, which you're right about that. It's just all going to come together for us this year. UTEP, win. Colorado, win. Northern Iowa, win. Illinois, win. We still haven't even left home. Our first road game's Purdue, manageable, win. Rutgers comes home, tough, but we should win that. At Indiana, yeah, look ahead spot, Ohio State on deck, but there's a new everything at Indiana, too. We should win that one. We should be undefeated, right? We should be 7-0. We're going to Ohio State. Even if we lose that one, 7-1, UCLA, please win. At USC, we're too physical for them. We'll go out there. That'll be one of the defining wins for Matt Rule. We'll win that one. Wisconsin comes in the next week. That's tough. At Iowa the week after that. But if things fall right, we could be on a roll by then. Imagine the momentum. We're 11-1. Do you see how easy that was? In theory, it's a lot easier than in reality. So I'm going to make that a 9.75, but keep it on ice over here. Because inevitably, someone's going to make one of these predictions that's like a 9.5 or 9.75, and it comes true. We had 3 of those last year, 9.5 or bolder, that came true. What about this last one? This last one fell short. Cam from Hinesville, Georgia, said UCF wins the Big 12. Or at least meets Utah in the championship game. No Cam, no parentheses. We're just going UCF wins the Big 12. 9.25 on the boldness scale. It would be crazy. But in the Big 12, what are odds really? I mean, what is bold in the Big 12? So there's the group in the what I call like the lead pack of the odds at FanDuel. And UCF is in that lead pack. They're plus 1,200 to win the Big 12, but they're one of like, I think, 10 teams that have plus 1,200 or better odds. And there's so much unknown with them. They're one of the big portal winning teams this cycle. KJ Jefferson, you remember him at Arkansas? Quarterback, feels like he was there forever. He didn't retire. He didn't go to the NFL. He's at Central Florida now. And we had Malzahn on the show last year or last month when we were down there, and he was very careful. He said, I've never had another Cam Newton. KJ Jefferson's not another Cam Newton. I'm not saying that. He just said from a skill set standpoint, he's the closest thing to Cam Newton that I've had in terms of comparable skill set. Take it or leave it. And so Gus Malzahn has dive-bombed college football too many times for me to write him off and write this prediction off. I'm going to put 9.25 on it. It is bold, and they end the season with games at West Virginia and then Utah. So they could build up. There's a back-to-back of Cincinnati and at Iowa State in conference play in the middle of the year. It's the Big 12. It's going to be a whole bunch of one-possession games, and someone is going to be 5-1 in one-possession games, and why not Central Florida? Why not? If you want to know where those odds came from, FanDuel's where they came from. You can go over there right now. You can bet Central Florida, if you're so inclined, to win the Big 12. And you could get plus 1,200 odds on it. I think it would probably be a fun experiment for us to just go bet every Big 12 team. Just put a 50 spot on every Big 12 team. You'll get plus money return no matter who you bet, because no one is like technically minus money to win the conference. No one's minus to make the playoff out of the conference. And it's not necessarily that the Big 12 is brought to you by FanDuel. I just love looking at Big 12 odds on FanDuel. You can go look at tennis. You can look at the next golf tournament for all I care. But just make sure FanDuel is your spot, because they are the exclusive odds provider of this show, and we appreciate that. Let me do a little experiment over here right quick. So we've got, I don't know, like 15 or 1,600 people watching live, but we only have 268 likes on this video. And I don't want to fish for likes, but let's cast our net a little wider than 268. Just do us the small favor. Bradley's got to eat. Someone's got to put food on Bradley's table. And I can't do it with 268 likes. That's not even an appetizer at Chili's for Bradley. So please, don't do it for me. Feed Bradley. Feed Bradley. Let's end with something that is sure to not be controversial whatsoever, because everybody knows that we all agree on one thing on this show, more so than anything else, and that is USC football. The USC mood tracker is upon us, and that's basically where I try and take the temperature of the fan base. But the problem with the USC fan base is they're very fragmented when I talk to them. Some of them say, get off my lawn, and then others won't reveal their true feelings. But don't worry, I know enough where I know there's a little chasm/chasm, a little divide in the fan base right now. I think we've got a will see crowd, and we've got a we've seen crowd. So the we've seen crowd, that's the more aggressive, eternal optimism. We made the right staff moves. Heads up, we're going to drastically improve defensively just because we got Lynn to come across the city from UCLA, across town, I guess is the right way to say that. We were just dog trash last year from a coaching standpoint defensively, so there'll be an immediate big-time upgrade there. Recruiting is trending up. We made the right moves. We made the right philosophical shift. Miller Moss is going to ball out at quarterback. We're set. That's one mood. There's another group that says we'll see. And that is the group that respects the moves. No one's looking at the moves Lincoln Riley made and saying, well, I hate these. Of course you love them. I love them. Are you willing to give it time? This crowd, the we'll see crowd, I think is willing to give it more than a year before they cast judgment. They don't just blindly assume a head coach can change his DNA and the DNA of a program overnight. I probably fit more into that camp, but here's a scenario I could see happening. I think there's a scenario where Lincoln Riley just made all the right moves. They don't win 9 or 10 games this year, and so that's viewed as a failure in USC circles historically. And I end up defending Lincoln Riley against the first crowd, which is ironic because in May, the first crowd would listen to you temper expectations and say, you're a hater. You know, you say anything other than this defense is going to revolutionize itself this year, and to that crowd, you're a hater. Well, no, I think there'll be noticeable improvement, but I still think that there'll be a long way to go because I don't think they have the players, specifically on the interior of their defensive line. They don't have the depth and caliber of player that they need this year. That's my opinion. When I say that they need, I mean that they need to play high-level football and contend in the Big Ten. But if you say that in May, you sound like a hater. Well, the thing about it is, I think I'm right on that, and I think the season will bear that out. Come December, that doesn't mean Lincoln Riley's a bad coach. It doesn't mean he failed. It doesn't mean that they made the wrong moves. It just means they got to have better football players. I could end up defending him against the very crowd that called me a hater for rightly predicting how the season goes. Happens every year with the team. Happened last year with Southern Cal, now that I think about it. And so I think there are a couple of different moods out there. Everybody likes the staff moves that were made. I think there's a difference in opinion of what to expect this year. And the latter group is the kind of group that they could look at an 8-win season and say, don't like that, but we're still good long term. First group, man, we're USC. We should win this thing this year. You are USC. That's absolutely right. And I'd love to see you do it, contrary to semi-popular belief. I'm not sure that that's in the cards this year, but if I'm wrong, you play Michigan this year. I guess it's the best year to go get Michigan. They're replacing their entire coaching staff. You play Washington at Washington this year. Those are two toughest road games. They're replacing everyone as well. So Notre Dame at the end of the year, at home, of course. You got LSU in Vegas before anyone really knows what to expect from either team. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. We'll see. But I think the mood amongst the fan base may be a little bit split. And I'm sure the peristyle will set me right on every point that I just made wrong. Thank you guys so much. Jesse's getting married this week. They're not opening the wedding to the public, so I can't tell you where. I can't tell you when. It's in the United States. It's not on a Saturday. It's not in the fall. So those were the parameters that I needed checked before I agreed to show up. And I'm going to represent us all. I got us a gift. We're good on that front, so you guys don't have to worry about anything. I say all that to say, interim producer Grishy was in the chair tonight. He did an admirable job. Bradley, the associate, they flew him up to New York this past week for training, some weird training. So it's just been me and Director Colin, like old times down here this week. Well, we got it done. Appreciate all you guys for tuning in. Make sure you subscribe to the pod and subscribe to the channel. We're going to have a live show Tuesday night. And then the extra pod will come later in the week because I'll be traveling later in the week. So 48 hours. I'll see you right back here. Until then, have a great start to your week. Take care, and God bless.